Spurs have one game to save Christmas. Welcome to the latest episode of Talking Tottenham with myself, Ryan Taylor and Alasdair Gold. Talking Tottenham is sponsored by NordVPN. Ali, how are you doing, mate?
I think I've still got the the last game in my bloodstream. I still got the visit to the City Ground. Both you and I are both kind of taken some much needed days off this week, do our Christmas shopping and just essentially purge ourselves from Spurs for a few days. But it's still there. I think the moment I start to have to talk about it, I can actually feel my blood pressure kind of raising again. But yeah, we had to talk about it. Unfortunately, it's got to be spoken about, and some other little bits and pieces that happened in the last couple of days as well.
Yeah, there's been a lot to discuss actually. Thankfully, a large interview with Micky van der Ven was released on the overlap to help us kind of get over that wretched display at Forest. And there's been some really interesting quotes actually from Micky in terms of some insight on last season and the glory in Bilbao, what it was like to work under Ange, and some bits on Thomas Frank. What did you make of the interview, Ali? It was something I actually like to see from players get the chance to open up sort of in a bit more of a longer format as opposed to sort of a short 5 to 10 minute thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't lie, a little bit of trepidation, especially the last time Gary Neville spoke to a Spurs player. I mean, he might have done others in between, but the main one I kind of remember being Harry Kane. It was like the worst timed interview. Oh my goodness. It came right towards the end. I think it was Ryan Mason's first caretaker season, I think it was. And oh my goodness, essentially just lots of talk of Kane leaving. And it was like the worst possible time as they were trying to chase, I think it was maybe even Champions League place still at that point. And they, it was not a great interview in terms of for Tottenham, I don't think. And I think a lot of people, especially with the little links to Real Madrid that they've been with Van der Ven, I think we're thinking, oh no, it's going to go that way at some point. But to be fair, it didn't really. It never kind of went towards that. If anything, the future was more about being a world-class centre-back and all that, and his aims in that respect. But yeah, look, we've probably both spoken to Micky over the last couple of years. He's a very honest, engaging guy, and he clearly, I think, I'm not going to say starstruck by Gary Neville, but he was very, I'd say, excited to be talking to Gary Neville. Yeah. I think he is, will be a big name, a famous pundit to him. And I think the fact that he was sat alongside his dad, Marcel, was pretty cool as well. And it kind of, I think it just made it a really laid back conversation. And we know that as soon as we can get someone sitting down in a proper 1v1 or 1v2 in this case situation, you're going to get so much more out of them. And yeah, it was good. It had loads of interesting stuff. I'd say there were a fair chunk of things that we kind of knew or suspected, which were kind of confirmed, but also just a nice insight really into life under Ange Postecoglou and life now under Thomas Frank, and just the mentality that Micky van der Ven has had. And I think it probably came at quite a good time, as you kind of said at the top of this, a bit of a distraction from what went on at the weekend as well. But yeah, what did you make of it and some of those kind of key lines out of it?
Yeah, we'll go through some of those in a second, and I'd like to echo what you said there about Micky in terms of how he comes across. I think fans probably have a great perception of him, but it's important to note that actually within media circles as well, he is someone that, is very helpful to journalists. I know after the Brentford game the other week, I was waiting in the mix zone to speak to a player, and a lot of the players had to shoot because obviously their families were in the lounge, and Micky was one of the last out the dressing room, and I didn't even need to ask him. He actually walked straight over to us and, very honest, gives great answers. And, he's an incredible player. That goes without saying. But I agree. I think he come across really well in this, and he's very honest. I think that's kind of a Dutch kind of thing, really. But one of the key quotes that I know's gained a lot of kind of interest in is the fact that he said, I still believe in Ange's system. I'll go through the full quote now. So he said, Ange really believed in his system. And even today, I still believe in his system because we played some unbelievable football. So the system works, but we needed to adapt a bit more. I think kind of going back to that, obviously last season, there was so much kind of sort of discussion about whether it was the right system and whether Spurs had to adapt. But actually, I think with this kind of quote, for me, it brings up memories of that spell when he first arrived at the club. One of the games that stands out to me was Burnley away. I think some of the football that was played that day, albeit Burnley were not great opposition, was incredible. And it was the first time I actually sat up and took notice of a different kind of style at Spurs, because Kane had just left the club and it was like, can they be successful? And actually, with Sonny as the 9, there was so much great football from the back. I think Romero scored a great goal that day. So, sorry, that's a little bit of a ramble there, but
No,
I think going back to the initial point that he still believes in the system, I think some people have maybe taken that as, there's still a lot of love for Ange maybe at Spurs. And do you think that's fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yeah, don't worry about that. Certainly wasn't a ramble. Anyone that listens to these knows that I ramble. I certainly ramble. And actually, as a ramble, very quickly, only because I'm going to forget it if I don't. My little Micky van der Ven Mick story. I can't remember if I said this on the pod or not before, but Goodison Park. I was the only one of the regulars that was there. So I went down after the press and I thought I'll try and grab someone. And Micky I'd managed to, because of the press conferences, sometimes they go on a little bit, I'd managed to miss everyone. And I saw Micky coming out. I think he was the last guy. And he kind of went past a little bit like, I can't say we're going, I've got to go like the last person. Yeah. And he wandered off down the corridor and I watched him. And there was this moment when he realized, he went in the door and it's like, I've gone the wrong way. I've completely gone the wrong, this is not the way to the coach. And he kind of sheepishly came back. He was like, I've got to stop now because I look like an idiot. And I was like absolutely. That. Yeah, no, he's a good guy. And yeah, I mean, I think this interview for me, it's got, in a weird way, something for everyone. So if you really like Ange Postecoglou, you will read it and you will or listen to it. I do think the best way is actually to watch the full thing. I think there's a really interesting context to some of the quotes as well. And also you see his face, the way he kind of, sounds weird to say, but he kind of does light up a bit when he's talking about Ange's era and stuff. He clearly did really enjoy it. But also, so people that like Ange, I think, will listen to it and take a lot of good stuff about Ange Postecoglou and what he did with the players and how much the players loved him, etc. People that didn't like Ange Postecoglou equally will watch it or listen to it and say, oh, well, there you go. Everything we knew. The players didn't think he had a plan B and, they needed to kind of step in. I think probably the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I think absolutely, like you say, the football Ange played there, other than a sprinkling of games, Spurs would score goals, and you felt they could score goals. I mean, you only have to look now. We're at the stage where, at this point last season, Spurs had scored 11 more goals than they have right now in the Premier League, and that's despite us all looking back at last season and in the Premier League it was a bad season. Yet they'd scored 11 more than they have right now. And so the players loved it. I think, I can't remember which player said it, but someone along during the season, it was either last or the first season, said, this is the football. It actually might have been Ange. The football they wanted to play as kids, essentially. That's what they're doing now. They're just playing really enjoyable, attacking football. But yes, absolutely, there were times when they were wildly exposed at the back and the system didn't always work in certain games. And the fact that he and Romero went to speak to him as leaders in the group and just said, look, we've got some of these games, we can't, we do have to sit on a lead kind of thing and stuff like that. And there's two ways of looking at it. You could say that Ange has, he's had to kind of concede the player power, whatever. You could look at it that way, or you can say he's a collaborative manager, and the best managers out there do actually talk to their players and discuss their grievances. And I'm sorry to say this to people that wanted to say that Ange doesn't adapt. He adapted. He agreed to it. And lo and behold, they won a trophy. I think the frustrating thing almost is, why didn't he do it sooner? Why didn't he, adapt the system at stages at previous points? I think he probably did more so than we actually realized. But I do think it's quite interesting to hear from behind the scenes. And I think it's quite interesting to hear him say the system does work and I still believe it works. It just needed tweaking. But he wasn't as much of a tinkerman maybe than he actually needed to be.
Would you not argue, Ali, that in terms of tweaking that system, Spurs were perfectly equipped, really, once they started to adjust for the Europa League, because obviously it's a knockout competition as opposed to the matches, where it was clear Spurs needed to get up the table. And actually, Ange's best way of winning games was to play attacking football, whereas in the Europa League, obviously, there were a few games where they had to defend leads, such as Bodo. Obviously, they had to grind it out in Frankfurt, which I believe is the match that Micky's actually referring to when he said him and Kuti went to speak to Ange.
Yeah, he wouldn't really be pinned down on the time. It kind of suggested almost that was the match.
Yeah.
And then he kept kind of heading around it. Yeah. And look, as someone, as the many regulars covering Spurs during Ange's time had to do a deep dive on him. And when you do look back, his record in kind of knockout football is really good. And there is also, especially in knockout football, a willingness to adapt. It's really weird. It's not, I think people would say this as, oh, at Tottenham's the first time. He actually didn't. You could stretch back throughout his clubs in like the A-League as well. There would be games where they would sit back, they would defend, they would hold on, they would counter and stuff like that. So I do think he did kind of adjust his tactics in knockout football because he realised just how important it was in that moment. Whereas over the course of a season, he felt like his normal methods would work, but obviously it's not going to work if you're going to play your second 11, in almost every Premier League game towards the end of the season or second half of a season. And I mean, look, his reign is almost, other than Bilbao, it is a reign of what ifs. Excuse me. What if he didn't lose Romero and Van der Ven for long periods in both seasons? What if he didn't have an injury crisis in both seasons? What if his brand of football was adjusted slightly so it maybe didn't cause some of those injuries and stuff like that? There are so many what ifs to it. But yeah, just you could tell the affection that's there for like a real father figure. I mean, we saw that kind of outpouring when he left, but you could just tell it in Micky's interview. Like every time he speaks about it, it's Ange. And when he talks about Thomas Frank, I thought it was quite interesting. The first maybe once or twice he calls him Thomas, and then there's a couple of times it goes on he calls him Frank. And that might just be a mistake. I've been very close in press conferences to calling him Frank because that's the danger of a two first name, quite frankly. Sorry, I didn't even mean to say, quite frankly. And I just think it's something he's going to. There's going to be a relationship built there, no doubt. It's very early days there, but yeah, it's a strange one with Ange. I mean, what did you think about the stuff that he said about Thomas Frank's kind of the things he does at Spurs and training and things like that?
Yeah, I think to me it indicates there is kind of an appreciation for Frank at Spurs, but obviously for one reason or another it's not quite clicking at this moment in time. I think it's weird because when I look at Spurs now, I'm still trying to actually establish exactly what Frank is trying to do in terms of that philosophy, because the kind of impression I had of him at Brentford was that actually he liked to attack, and although it was pragmatic, they were a team that were capable of scoring lots of goals, whereas actually they've been quite sort of a dull and pragmatic kind of team under his stewardship. So I think Micky at this moment in time is probably sort of cautious that Frank still needs time to implement some of those methods, but obviously patience is wearing thing amongst the fan base, and actually we're in a position where we're starting to actually, question whether it's sustainable long term because it's just not yielding the results.
Quick question to you: Is it a case of Ange had a system that he was stuck to and would only go away from at the very end? And maybe you've got someone like Thomas Frank who has maybe no set system that he sticks to and is constantly changing things. It's almost like the other end of the extreme.
Exactly. And I think, the ideal situation is probably a perfect blend of the two, because I think there was so much. I know it's a topic that it's a bit tedious to go back over, but there was so much to like about Ange's football. Whenever I watched Spurs, you were going to be entertained one way or another, whereas I think under Frank, it's gone too far the other way, where it's so bland that actually, if the team don't win, there's no real positives whatsoever. Whereas under Ange, it was a case of dying on the sword and going hell for leather. but it's really difficult. I just, at this moment in time, I'm really kind of struggling to warm to the football under Frank, because I think even when they win, I think of the Slavia game, they were still a little bit vulnerable defensively, and I still feel like it's such a work in progress, that they're so far from being actually what Frank wants them to be, in my opinion. I just wanted to touch upon again, Ali, if that's okay, the one of the key quotes from Micky on Ange, just about how he was a little bit surprised maybe at the decision to sack him. Obviously, he said you couldn't escape the kind of uncertainty, because every time he looked at his phone, there was stuff. I know you worked hard on trying to kind of understand what was going to happen with Ange, and it sort of rumbled on for far too long. But he said he was a really good manager. I still really like him. I don't know how everything went backstage. I didn't expect it. It was strange how everything went after. He's the manager that won silverware for Tottenham. Afterwards, when he got sacked, I sent a message to my dad and my friends, and I said, I never expected this. And it kind of, to me, leads to that $1 million question, Ali, which is quite uncomfortable to answer. And obviously, we're blessed with hindsight, but, we're 6 to 7 months now in probably to Frank's tenure. And we're at the stage where maybe it is time to debate whether Spurs were right to sort of shift to Frank and ditch Postecoglou.
Ooh, that is a big question.
I'm not asking for a definitive answer, but I think it's something that we probably need to discuss now we're halfway through the season.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair question. I mean, because you can look at the stats right now, and Spurs under Frank in the Premier League especially have picked up just 22 points from the 16 games, which is their lowest tally since, I think the only one that was worse was 17 years ago. I feel like it was the Ramos season when he got sacked.
Yeah.
When they were second from bottom, as Harry Redknapp would constantly tell us. Was it 2 points second from bottom? Something like that. It's a difficult thing to look at in terms of there's a longer term context to it. You could argue quite rightly that everything is worse right now than it was last season, in a season that was kind of absolutely criticised Premier League wise for being a stinker. They finished 17th. Cups, obviously, they won the Europa League, got to semi-finals of the Carabao. So Cups probably is the kind of the outlying thing you can't steer away from. But yeah, Premier League, absolute stinker. Yet right now they're currently on course to do worse than that.
Yeah.
I think they've got 11 goals fewer they've scored. I think they've conceded 1 or 2 more, despite that being a priority. The defence, I think they're a point less. Point fewer this season. So yeah, you could look at it straight off like that. The other way to maybe, I'm sure, is the way that Thomas Frank would say, is that maybe you've got to kind of pull apart the machine to then put it back together in a different way, or something, a more efficient way, or I don't know. And people could also point to Pochettino's first season, where it was all a bit of a mess to begin with, and then he found his way. It's such a difficult question to answer, because personally, of course, I would have been fascinated to see how this season 3 worked out. His big declaration that season 3, was always the best, and it will be even better. He was a guy that he said stuff and he delivered. And that's a very difficult thing to get away from. And, Micky spoke about it in this interview with Gary Neville. He said, he would say things before a game or at half time. You just were walking on air. You were going out wanting to believing you could do everything.
Yeah.
And the fact that he gave them, for many of them, not Cuti Romero, because he's obviously won so much, but for many of them, the greatest night of their football lives already on that night in Bilbao, they've got a lot of affection for him. And I think they would have had, they would have certainly played for him. Who knows? This kind of adapted version of Postecoglou football might have gone into the next season. He might have collaborated and created a, Ange Ball 3.0. It might have been a different thing. It's all what ifs. That's the question we'll kind of never know. And I can absolutely understand him being surprised, and it's unexpected, because as players, you're probably thinking, we just won something. First time Spurs won something in 17 years. Why are you getting rid of the man that did it? But then I see it from the Spurs point of view, and they felt like that was an outlier. That was almost everything else was kind of going wrong, and that was just something to hang a hat on. Whereas they wanted more of a sustained kind of thing going forward, and they felt that Thomas Frank was the man to do that. And I did feel bad the other day in his presser when I had to ask him. Honestly, the amount of managers I've had to ask this question to, do you think you're going to have the time to change things?
Yeah.
And he was like, I believe so, because there's no quick fix to this, what's happening. And, a question for you, actually, I'm going to bounce it back at you. Is it a club, and this is a question I keep hearing, kind of, or a statement I keep hearing, is it a club where losing has been normalised, in the Premier League especially, because of what happened last year?
That's a good question, but I think probably in the context of this season, yes, because ultimately it couldn't be worse domestically than last season without actually probably being relegated.
Do the players care enough about losing?
You're right. It's probably a dressing room that the standards in the Premier League definitely slipped last season, and losing has become sort of part of the fabric, unfortunately, certainly in the last sort of 12 to 18 months.
Ironically, when they've just become winners. It's really weird, isn't it?
It is. It's the most Tottenham thing ever, probably. But just to kind of move it on a little bit, I would like to see Spurs. I'm not sure whether Thomas Frank is the man, but I would like to see Spurs. Sorry to talk about the club from down the road, but actually back a manager such as what has happened to Arteta at Arsenal for a sustained period of time, to give them that sort of 4 to 5 years, multiple transfer windows, just to work towards something. I think the only sort of
sticking point... Who was the CEO, just out of interest, during that time?
What's that, sorry?
Who was the CEO at that time?
At Arsenal?
Yeah.
The Cronks.
CEO was Vinay, wasn't it?
Vinay Venkatesham. Sorry.
Yeah, I was giving you a link. I was giving you a link between the two.
Sorry, I fumbled that one. But you're right. Vinay is someone that, to be honest, I anticipated him working alongside Daniel Levy for a long time. So I think it's
Levy did as well.
A difficult proposition, really. But I'm not sure whether Frank is the right man, or he's done enough so far to sort of warrant that. You could argue Pochettino obviously had a kind of very similar debut season at the club. But I would like to see Spurs sort of move forward now with a manager for a longer period of time, to give them... It's a bit like Manchester United at the moment with Ruben Amorim. To me, a lot of people say he's not the right fit. We've spent all this money. I know United don't have European football this year, but you're starting to see, if you look at the table, the results, slowly, there's been progress. Whether that will amount to anything more longer term, I'm not sure. But I still feel like Spurs are a club where there's something to be tapped into and built over time. And that's what I'd like to see. Whether Frank is the right man, I'm not sure. I think a lot of people, if we're being brutally honest, are kind of slipping away and losing faith in him at this moment in time. But that's what I would like to see, if I'm being, truthful.
They need to give someone a chance. I think that's absolutely key, isn't it? It's like we're almost at the stage where, whether it's right or wrong, they need to let someone try to create something. You just talk about Amorim there. How long has he been there? About a year now, year and a half?
Over a year, yeah, just over a year, I think.
And we're talking about Thomas Frank, who's had, 3 months of the season, 4 months of the season?
Yeah.
It's probably, a month of pre-season, another 4 months of the season or so.
Yeah.
It's like, it is incredibly early. I think the problem is, of course, is that the football has been absolutely horrendous at times. There's been a few games. It's almost a switch around to Postecoglou, in that while they looked like they could concede at any moment with Postecoglou, it felt like they could score 2 or 3 at any moment as well. Whereas with Thomas Frank, it's more of it feels like there's more games where they don't look like they can score than ones where they can, and that's not good. And that's obviously something he's got to fix. And whether that comes with players coming back, whether that comes with new faces, I don't know. But at some point, you've got to stick rather than twist. I know there'll be some people saying, well, it's all very well showing patience, but if you're jump on the wrong train, you're still going to head to the wrong destination, whether you stay on it or not. But I just feel like Spurs have never tried since Pochettino to actually give someone time. And if you're not going to do it with Conte and Mourinho, two of the biggest in the world, Nuno barely even kind of got his foot through the door before he was out. He's a guy that has struggled at the start at previous clubs, at Brøndby and Brentford. We know this. It is part of a pattern in his career. And he's a guy that will want to change a lot of the culture behind the scenes as well. And it is also, we'll talk about change. We're going to talk about that in a minute. It is such a huge kind of time of change at the football club as well. It feels like a club that is still trying to find its feet in this new era. So I personally think the club will stick with him and give him a bit more time, because I think they realise they've got to break this cycle that they've been in. It's just, as I always call it, the biennial Tottenham wheel of doom. It's just every 2 years, someone new is in charge. If you're going to do it, give it a go. It's one of those where it might get worse before it gets better, but it's whether ultimately it's the paying fans that will probably put the pressure on either way. So we'll have to see what comes next.
Definitely. I think that was well summarised there, Ali. Sorry to throw an awkward question at you, Gary Postecoglou. But I know it's a prevalent topic amongst supporters at this moment in time. If anyone is going away for Christmas, Ali might have something for you. Do you want to talk about the benefits of our favourite topic, NordVPN, Ali?
I thought you were saying I was going to deliver some kind of present to them the way you set that up. I was thinking, I am not available for, I'm not going on a sleigh anywhere right now. It may be that people are going away. It may be people that are already booking their summer holidays. It may be that you're not a big fan of Christmas and you just want to head off anywhere. Or you want to use your device to watch things from abroad this Christmas, which you can all do with NordVPN, because it is a service that has a whole host of different things you can use. You can use it to book tickets, book airline tickets, book hotel rooms, book concerts, anything from a destination country. Make your phone think it's in a completely different place. Or the flip side is, if you are going away, you can make your phone or device or tablet, whatever it is, think it's back in the UK, so you can still access everything you normally would. It also helps you in terms of those horrible threats you got online, because NordVPN's threat protection feature protects you from viruses, malicious malware, and phishing sites. Not the ones with, a rod and bait and all that sort of stuff. More the other horrible, nasty ones. And it is the fastest VPN in the world, which means there's no buffering, there's no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the world without your bandwidth throttling. Nobody likes their bandwidth throttled. It's an unpleasant experience. It's a great thing. I use it all the time. I've used it on my Spurs trips. I've used it just on holidays. It just allows you to access far more across the world than you ever thought you could possibly imagine. And we can also give you a great discount off your NordVPN plan. If you go to nordvpn.com/talking Tottenham, our link gives you an extra 4 months on the 2-year plan. And there's no risk either with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link, in case you just missed it there, is in the podcast episode description box.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ali. So let's touch upon 2 interesting little bites of potential Spurs news. Firstly, a potential arrival, Ali. Yes.
I mean, we've kind of spoken about this before, that the club we're gonna get a new kind of, how do they call it? It's head of football operations, I think was the latest title I'd heard. So I did a piece a couple of weeks back about the huge changes and this kind of role that this person was going to have within it. I mean, their remit, I think, director of football operations. It'll include football administration as well as women's football as well, training centre operations, player liaison. And that process looks to be heading towards, I'm going to read his full name out, Carlos Rafi Moersen, who's from the City Football Group. He's been there 10 years with the football group. It's called Rafi, I think, is his nickname. very experienced guy. Obviously, some people may look at that and say, well, what did Scott Munn do? They brought him in from the City Football Group and that didn't work out. I think he's still currently on gardening leave, Scott Munn. But certainly seems to be very well respected, Moersen, within City. I mean, I think, did a lot there in terms of negotiating player contracts as well, existing player contracts, but also started to get involved with negotiating contracts of those incoming players as well. Obviously, you could argue maybe easier to do that at a place like City, where you can say, here you go, £1 million a week for you. Whereas at Spurs, maybe slightly more difficult, but that will test his skills. And it's all, I think he'll take on some of Rebecca Kappelhorn's duties as well, who's heading off after a decade at the club. She's head of football administration and football governance. Sorry, head of administration and football governance. That's it. That's her title. She's kind of very popular figure, was also on a fair number of boards at the club, like the FA one, the European Football Clubs one as well, and presumably that place will be taken by the incoming person who, from what I understand, nothing's finalised yet, but certainly talks, advanced talks have taken place there. So yeah, another kind of head at the top. I think for the outside world, for the fans, you know, it's like, okay, how many kind of cooks are you going to have in the kitchen kind of thing. But this is kind of what people might remember, I was speaking about before, this big review that was done at the club, instigated by the Lewis family. They wanted to modernise the whole structure at the top of the club, because ultimately, for a long, long time, it was just one person in particular, Daniel Levy, with a couple of trusted people either side, in Donna Maria Cullen and Matthew Collicott, kind of being the main decision makers at the club, helped by like a director of football type. And the Lewis family, after doing this independent review that was instigated in the summer, found that the club could be being run in a far more kind of efficient way and a more modern way. And this is the result of it. This is this structure that's been laid out with Vinay Venkatesham essentially at the head of this as a CEO, and Peter Charrington as the non-executive chairman, kind of there as a part-time figure to lean upon as well, and a bigger board that's been kind of fleshed out over recent months. You've got Eric Hinson, I think, came in as well. You've got Jonathan Turner there as well. It's a bigger kind of, essentially, it's not a little football club anymore. I'm not saying that in terms of a football-wise. You know, we know Spurs in the past was this glorious trophy-winning machine of a club, but actually, as a club itself, clubs nowadays become these global entities, and you have to compare them with these massive corporations around the world, because that's what they've become. So they kind of need to be run in that way. So yeah, so many changes. I did an article, I think it's something like almost 15 changes of heads of department within the club, which is an enormous shift. And this is why, especially with a new head coach as well, I do think they're going to need some time to figure it out. But certainly, yeah, this guy comes in with a lot of experience. If it does finalise his deal, and I wonder whether, like Munn, there'll be a little period of no, you can't have him for a while. He sits on some kind of handover, gardening leave, whatever it may be. But certainly, it seems a guy with a lot of experience. I think experience in America to begin with as well, with MLS. I think was it DC United? I'm trying to remember now. But yeah, so another new face at the top. Won't mean too much to fans. I don't think they'll really see him on a day-to-day basis or hear from him. But certainly someone that will come in with the inner knowledge of the inner workings at a successful football club, and that can't be a bad thing in that respect for me.
Absolutely. Another potential piece of news from off the field, an important figure, Matt Wells, of course, the assistant head coach at this moment in time. We've known for quite a few days now that there's been quite strong interest from Colorado Rapids. Reports in America that a deal was done, but obviously not quite there yet, Ali. What's the latest on that one?
Yeah, we're still kind of waiting for that to be finalised, really, by both clubs. I mean, barring a late breakdown, it could be. I mean, we thought Ryan Mason was going to Belgium. I'm trying to remember which club it was now. It's completely gone out of my head.
Anderlecht, I think.
Was it? Yes, I think it was Anderlecht. I think you're quite right. We kind of thought that was happening, and then at the last moment, both parties kind of felt maybe this isn't the right move at the right time. we'll see with Matty Wells. Matty Wells very highly rated. He's come through the system at Spurs, was a player in the academy. Ended up, he's also the grandson of the legendary Cliff Jones as well. So he's got that little bit of double winning blood in him, DNA. And yeah, it's part of me thinks it's a shame that he hasn't kind of yet gone all the way through the levels. He's gone all the way up to assistant to 2 different managers now. But sometimes clubs at the very top, especially, say very top of the Premier League kind of ladder anyway, where Spurs should be, don't take a chance on young kind of managers coming through. They look outside the club, and sometimes these managers have to go away to kind of earn their stripes and come back. And it looks like that's what he's going to do. It's not what Ryan Mason's trying to do at West Brom. He's having a tough time there, but he's getting some like kind of important little results, like the Sheffield United one the other day. But yeah, Matty Wells, very highly rated, very highly regarded. We asked Thomas Frank about it after the Forest game, and he was very much like, same as he has been with the injuries, we'll let you know when there's something to formalise to be announced. Okay, thank you, Thomas. From what people say, from what I've heard from people who enjoy MLS, I'm not saying I don't, I just haven't watched as much of it in the last year or so. I probably should with Sonny over there. It'd be kind of exciting to see how he gets on. But yeah, from what people say, it's a tough gig. That's going to be a challenge for him to go in. So then they obviously missed out on the playoffs this year, and he's going to have a fair bit of work on his hands. And I think they've got Rob Holding, haven't they? Isn't the ownership? There's an Arsenal connection there as well, isn't there?
There is. They're owned by the Cronks, and I believe Jack Wilshere was also in the fray for the job in the summer, I believe. So we're actually seeing a bit of a trend really over the past couple of years. A lot of young British managers going over to the MLS. I think Eric Ramsey from Manchester United is at Minnesota. I did actually have a press trip to Charlotte and to Miami last year, which was great to gain a bit of understanding of the MLS. And we spoke
One awful trip to have to undertake, that is.
I know. It was incredible, I have to say. But we spoke to a lot of the MLS executives, and they were saying there's a big push on British coaches at the moment because they're so knowledgeable, and they feel that, those that have been exposed to the Premier League and even the Championship can bring a lot to the league and help grow the sport over in the United States ahead of the World Cup. So I'm not surprised to see Matt Wells, someone who is, as you said, very well respected within Spurs, to be considered as a leading candidate for that job. But again, another little bit of a difficult situation for Frank to navigate. Maybe doesn't come at a great time for Spurs. Ali, we've got to touch, unfortunately, a little bit on Forest. I know you've probably you've just slowly started to recover, but there are a few talking points really that I thought it was important to address. I'm sure the fans can let us know in the comments what they think, but there's been a lot of stick for Vicario. Obviously nothing new because we've spoken about it on recent podcasts, particularly after the Fulham game. But you were actually saying to me off air there that, you felt maybe it was a little bit harsh for the first goal. And also we were talking about the accuracy of both the second and third goals, that actually, there's not many keepers that probably would have kept either of those out.
Yeah, look, I know I'm fighting against the tide here. I'm essentially trying to paddle a boat up a waterfall. But yeah, look, there certainly have been games where Vicario has made mistakes, and there's no getting away from that. And of course, Fulham, absolutely one of them. I just feel like the narrative that was built behind him has kind of seeped into this game as well. And I don't feel like he was as much as the villain as people want to paint him to be. It was quite interesting, actually. I think at the game, a lot of the journalists or the regulars that cover Spurs who were there weren't really pinning it on Vicario too much. And the journalists who more regularly cover Forest or clubs up in the kind of further up the country immediately said, Vicario's made a blooper there. And I think maybe that divide there comes from the first goal is from a move that you and I and the other journalists have seen a million times under not only Thomas Frank, but under Ange Postecoglou as well.
Yeah.
It is the classic midfielder dragging a marker, an attacker, someone else with them out of the kind of the middle of the pitch. They receive the ball from Vicario and they instantly hit it to either flank. And what you've done, you've immediately pulled someone out of the centre of the pitch and suddenly there's space. It's a move that they do probably 20, maybe even 30 times a game. But unfortunately, in this instance, Archie Gray took a touch. And that's what killed it. I've seen people saying, oh, Vicario should have said, shouldn't have passed to him because he would have seen the man behind him. Unfortunately, that's the point. He's meant to have a man behind him. You're meant to be dragging a player out of position. That's the whole point of the move. And I think if you want to give any criticism, it's that Vicario puts it to his left foot rather than his right.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's where I would say, if you want to say something's wrong with it, that's probably it. And Archie, rather than reacting to that, has taken a touch or trusting his left foot, perhaps.
I think there's a little glance up from Archie that maybe just sort of disturbs his rhythm and momentum a little bit.
Yeah, Archie's running in, screaming for the ball. He wants the ball. It's a bold, brave move. That's what he's supposed to do, but he's just executed it wrong.
And it will make him better as well.
Oh, 100%. I asked Thomas Frank about that afterwards, and he said 100% it's something he'll learn from. He said he was irritated in the moment, of course, and he, again, was another one purely on Archie. And look, this isn't a pile-on a 19-year-old. He knows that in that position, he's just meant to tap it sideways. That's all you have to do, and suddenly Spurs are up the pitch. That's the beauty of that move. It creates space. You can get up the pitch really quickly into loads of areas of space on it because you've brought maybe one, sometimes two people out of position. So I'm not with the Vicario on that one, or the Vicario blame on that one. Second one, I still think it's harsh to pin it on him because, quite frankly, he's coming out expecting a cross, as any goalkeeper would be, and it is the most freakish Hudson-Odoi kind of curling, what ends up being a shot, which not in a million years does he mean. And it's gone in that, wasn't quite top corner, but it goes into the net behind him. It's not an area where a keeper in any way is expecting that ball to loop. Look, if you, as a goalkeeper, you probably will look at both that and the third goal, despite, like, I know you're saying the accuracy of it, and you'll say you got beaten from long range twice. That's probably where you will criticize yourself. But still, I kind of feel like there's a lot of things that went wrong with that performance on Sunday. And I think Vicario, I saw Carragher was coming out with some comments about him as well. And I just feel like this narrative has kind of been pushed onto him where he has made mistakes in the past. I didn't think this was one where his actual mistakes were as clear as people were trying to make out for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair assessment. I think it's difficult because, as we've said so many times, Vicario has saved Spurs on a number of occasions, and it's like you say, it's easy to sort of pin the blame on him all the time. But I think it is a situation that is going to have to kind of be looked at by Frank over the next sort of 3 to 4 weeks, because if it becomes a distraction again and Vicario's performances aren't consistent, I know he's got a top young keeper in there, he might be slightly raw, but there is a counter argument that if Kinski's to make these mistakes, maybe you can understand it, because I know you're saying they're not mistakes at Forest, which I think is absolutely fair, but we have seen other goals and instances where he kind of he creates some problems for Spurs. So I think in Kinski, there is a prospect that the club clearly believe in.
Do you think he trusts Kinski? I'm not.
I don't at this moment in time, but I think you can almost sort of understand if a younger keeper is kind of enduring a few of these shaky moments, if that makes sense. I seem to remember Joe Hart. I don't know why. I always remember he was very raw when he first got thrown into the mix at City, but actually, obviously, he was very consistent over time before he, of course, got moved on by Guardiola. But I like Kinski, and I know that's not popular. Not everyone agrees with me, because I think he has, sometimes looked a little bit shaky. But the first few games he played, I think in January, he really impressed me. I liked his kick-in. Newcastle away in the Carabao Cup, he wasn't great. But I do think, we've seen rumblings of Inter Milan maybe being interested in Vicario. I wouldn't be surprised if sort of long-term it's a situation where we could maybe see change.
My gut feeling is they'd go outside. I think if Vicario were to go, I think they'd bring in another keeper.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Kinski's quite ready at this moment in time, but I don't see the harm in kind of seeing how he gets on. But I do like Vicario as a character. I think he's so important, and as I said, he fronts up a lot of the defeats. Um, but yeah, it's. I think at this moment in time, if you're being brutally honest, I think neither are really, top goalkeepers in my personal opinion. I know some might disagree. Um,
What
just
did you make
moving
of the
forward.
attack? I was going to say,
Go on.
sorry, you might have been going in the same
All right.
direction. What did
Yeah,
you make of the attack?
let's move it forward. So I think again, it's so sort of up and down with Spurs. We've seen at home they've looked actually really good going forward at times. I know the opposition probably wasn't great, but Forest obviously have kind of a defensive structure. And really, off the top of my head, outside of that sort of Archie Gray snapshot, there wasn't really much kind of threat.
That was it.
I
It's the only
don't.
shot on target in the whole game.
Yeah. So I'm not quite sure on Kolo Muani and Richarlison playing together. I like one or the other.
Mm.
Just in terms of having two pure out and out wingers, that would be my preference. But
Yeah.
again, there is this argument that the likes of Tel or Bear, yes, they haven't had huge opportunities, but are they really sort of staking a claim to actually give Frank something really serious to think about? Probably not. And that gives him the freedom to kind of do what he's doing at the moment, where he's kind of shoehorning both strikers in. Ali, I think the question for you really is mainly, is it essential that Spurs dip into the market in January, in your view? Or would you like to see the likes of Tel and Odebear given a little bit more time?
There's someone else that hasn't even mentioned there. Last season's top scorer, Brennan Johnson.
Brennan Johnson, of
It's a bit
course.
like.
It's only because we've spoken about him a lot recently.
Oh,
and
I know, and it does baffle me. They've scored 11 goals fewer this season. Yet the guy that scored so many goals last season isn't
18 or
even
whatever.
getting minutes. Yeah, it's so weird. And honestly, we're at the stage where if Thomas Frank does get the time and does stay, I wouldn't be stunned if Brennan Johnson heads off. I wouldn't
there
be
was
surprised.
reports last week, wasn't there, of Crystal Palace interest, which on paper would be a great fit. You could see him going there and being similar to sort of Sarr. He was just so effective, sort of just having that free role behind the striker. But I'd love to see Brennan stay because, again, I think he deserves respect. And I think, he has been a little bit sort of harshly treated this season, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think him and Tel will probably. I say Tel definitely. I think in a January window we'll head off and get regular game time somewhere on loan. I would imagine. I know there was some links with Roma. With Brennan Johnson, I know there's a lot of interest. There's a string of Premier League clubs looking at him, and I think some from abroad as well. And it might get to the point where if Thomas Frank says he's not part of his plans, despite wanting him at Brentford, it's quite interesting. That's kind of what's happened.
I find that really strange. I do.
Yeah. Just different time. I guess he's got Kudus, who he sees on the right. I would love to see, just as a trial, because they just haven't done it, Kudus playing on the left, because he played there in West Ham in his first really good, successful season there, a fair few times on the left. So I give him a go on the left, because he's always cutting in and crossing from his left foot anyway. Put him on the left, Johnson on the right, where we've seen him score goal after goal. Stick Kolo Muani through the middle, let's say, and just see how that works.
Why not?
And yes, he doesn't turn to Tel from the bench quick enough for me. I mean, very quickly before we move on to other stuff, what did you make of that substitution that everyone kind of got a bit baffled by with Davis, Paulinho coming on alongside Bergvall when they were trailing 2-0?
I know. I mean, I think I have to be a little bit careful in terms of what I say, but
no, go for it.
I think there's been a lot of times really where I've had huge doubts over Thomas Frank in terms of some of the decisions he's made and his outlook on some of the games, particularly ones that I've been at in particular. Some of the things that he said maybe in his post-match press conferences I haven't kind of agreed with. And who am I to, question a Premier League manager and clearly an astute coach? But I just sometimes feel, am I watching the same game as you? And, I don't know. I think there are times where it doesn't fill me with confidence, some of the decisions he's made. I know a lot of his substitutions are pre-planned, which again, I struggle to kind of reason with because I think there's been so many occasions this season where it needs kind of a sort of a bit of innovation. And actually, if you remember, Ali, when Spurs first unveiled Frank, they said in the statement that he was one of the most innovative coaches in modern football or in world football. And actually, I've not seen much of that. In terms of the triple change, I mean, again, I'm not a Spurs fan, but that would have really enraged me because, you know, that at that point you kind of get to kitchen sink territory where you just need to have a go. And again, not much good's come from it. Obviously, it didn't look great that the subs actually took too long. And then also Spence comes off and throws his jacket.
It's a bit of a strop.
Exactly. So from my perspective, I think that is not the kind of decision that's going to help you win over the fans.
No, I mean, in his explanation, because he was asked about it afterwards, he said about the structure, essentially paraphrasing massively, the structure wasn't working, so he wanted to kind of make that strong first. But I mean, taking Jed off, who did have a knock in the first half and looked, was really limping, but then second half looked fine, was an odd one because you lost a lot of attacking threat in that moment in doing that. Paulinho, it's like for like, isn't it? It's bringing in one defensive midfielder for another. And I wouldn't say Forest were massively threatening in that respect. That you just got to go for it, haven't you? So even if you're taking 100%. Off a fullback, maybe you throw on another attacking player. Like Alasdair sometimes will play a fullback, but also be a winger. I don't know. But
my problem as well, Ali, was that for me, all the danger was coming from down the flanks. I know obviously Davis is the change for Jed, but like the Paulinho for Bentancur was just it wasn't affecting it because a lot of the chances and goals actually Forest scored or the chances they had came from crosses into the box and sort of runners. So I don't know. I think that in particular for me was a little bit perplexing, but it's not surprising because we have seen that change made so many times this season.
But even Sarr, it was their last chance to got a Christmas delivery, so my dog is getting very excited about the prospect of whatever's coming through the door. Indeed, stay. So even Sarr, who's the last chance to use him before he goes off on the to the Africa Cup of Nations, he's a runner. He can get in the box. I'd probably rather have seen him than Paulinho coming on at that point. It was just really strange, and there's a really interesting point you make about how long it took to get them on the pitch. It felt like it's almost like he was going through a book of instructions to them, and it's just like, look, if you're trying to give them that much information, they are not going to retain all of it. Just get them on the pitch. I'm not saying go down the Harry Redknapp to Pavlyuchenko route of just telling him to run around a bit, but it doesn't have to be that convoluted that it took. They had to pass up one opportunity when the ball had gone out of play to get them on, and to wait till the next one because they were still getting loaded up with tactical information. And actually on that, very quickly, because we didn't talk about it in the Micky van der Ven stuff, Micky van der Ven said that a lot of the training sessions are walkthroughs and a lot of kind of with the opposition in mind, which is obviously completely different to Postecoglou ones, which were about drilling the system, the attacking, the movement, all of that into them. And some people think, it sounds a bit Conte-like, how they would kind of run through the motions. But I would say it's probably also to do with the sheer number of games they've got and trying to fit everything in and not having a high-intensity training because of that. But yeah, it just feels like one extreme to the other, like we said earlier. And I just felt attacking-wise, they were dreadful. Even Kudus, who I'm such a huge fan of and has been brilliant, kept running into blind alley. He was kind of doing the Lucas Moura run where he would take on a couple of people and then just run into a third. And you're like, release the ball. If you've brought another man to you, someone's free next to you. Use it. Xavi just didn't have any real impact at all. Kolomoani was probably the only one that had any impact. And going back to your very original question, yes, I think they will bring in an attacking player in the window. I think that's probably a necessity. I don't know whether it will be a striker or not, purely because Solanke, we were told, is back on the grass finally on Friday in the presser. So he's almost back. Wait a minute. Let me just walk back on that. He's maybe not almost back. We'll see. He's on the grass. That's the start. And he is using a ball, I think, as well. So that's something. But But if you get him back, you get Callum Moana, you've got Richarlison. I don't know if you need an out-and-out striker.
Particularly when you're only playing one centre forward in the system.
I'd say a left winger.
It's a left winger, isn't it?
It's got to be a left winger. I know obviously they wanted Savinho, and I wonder whether Savinho becomes available and they still go back for him if City bring someone in, perhaps.
I do. That's the one I see happening. I think Savinho at this moment in time, it looks like he's, not really fancied 100% by Guardiola. He's had a few nice cameos, but then obviously there's this talk that City are potentially in for Semenyo. We know he's a player that Spurs have looked at in the past and could potentially revisit. But amazing. To me, that would be the likely one that I would concede. Hypothetically, Semenyo to City and Savinho to Spurs. But Savinho has played a lot on the right at City as well. That's the only kind of
everyone playing on the right.
Yeah,
I mean, we have seen that there was one game, wasn't there, when he had no left side.
Yeah,
what was that? It wasn't Arsenal, was it?
No, it was Fulham.
Yeah. So maybe he will. Maybe we'll just line up with 3 right wingers and no one in the middle or on the left.
Just quickly, Ali, Liverpool, obviously, difficult game. There's been
the Ryan Taylor derby, they call it, don't they?
Yeah, the Ryan Taylor derby. So just a bit of context. Obviously, Mohamed Salah has now gone off to the Africa Cup of Nations, which from a Spurs perspective is good news because he was back playing and assisting against Brighton from the bench. But Arne Slot's side are depleted at the moment with a few notable injuries. The key one really, which could be a big boost for Spurs, is that Dominic Szoboszlai has picked up an ankle issue and it's not yet clear whether he'll be available to face Spurs. He's got great energy, scored at the, I believe it was nearly a year ago to the day once Saturday's game comes around, the 6-3 defeat last season where Liverpool ran riot, unfortunately, to...
he tears apart Spurs each time. Every time I've seen him, he's so good. So that would be a huge boost for Spurs if he's not available.
And Joe Gomez as well is looks like he'll be out as well with hamstring issues. So Liverpool have had a fair few issues at right back this season with injuries to Bradley and Frimpong. Isak's had a knock. But Liverpool have gone to a bit more of a rigid system in recent weeks. I think they're 6 unbeaten. So any fans that are sort of fearful of flying wingers, as we've seen with Liverpool in recent times, it's not really going to be the case. It will be kind of sort of Curtis Jones and Szoboszlai have recently been playing as kind of inside wingers. So it's a narrow team and the width comes from the fullbacks. But I think this is going to be quite an interesting game, Ali. I think Spurs, we've seen, have had some really poor results against some of the top sides at home. But this could be a chance to maybe... It's a very important game, particularly ahead of that Palace one, because lose the next 2 and it could turn, all a bit nasty, really.
I'm fearful of these next 2 games. I am, because it is a Liverpool side that just feel like they're starting to wake up.
Yeah,
I think they haven't lost in 4 or 5 games.
I think it's 6 now in all comps.
6. Oh, there you
Something
go.
Like that.
And there's that, and obviously Palace. I know they lost to City, but they're doing really well this season. It does worry me. The only thing I'm clinging on to is that it's a rare occasion. I'm trying to even remember the last time it happened, where Thomas Frank has got 2 full weeks before each one, or 6 days and 8 days technically, to work
before the
with the
chaos
players.
Begins.
Yes, and yeah, just drill exactly what he wants into them, rather than just rushing from game to game, hoping that they're taking on board what he's saying through walkthroughs, rather than actual kind of putting it into practice on the training pitches. So that's what I'm clinging to. We'll see. I'm intrigued to see whether he goes for it at home, because it is, they get tonked at home by Liverpool in the front of that crowd. That crowd are absolutely going to be after him. So I think he has to bring something to the party in terms of some good football. I don't think they can just look to cling on and hope and get a set piece goal, which probably will end up being exactly what happens now. But yeah, they just need to show something for those people that are turning up and paying to go and watch them. I think it is quite a big one. And then another London derby. It's a little festive. It's a freer festive period, but probably an even more important one than they've had in years, I think, especially for him.
I think it's important that Micky has actually had experience going up against Hugo Ekitike as well. Obviously, they had a really good battle last year in the Europa League with Ekitike scoring for Frankfurt at Spurs. But in the second leg, he was kind of locked down in the end. There was a few hairy moments, but it's going to be really interesting. We're both at the game, Ali, aren't we? So there'll be lots of
he's been speaking about Isak, hasn't he?
Yes, he has been speaking about Isak to Gary Neville in that overlap interview. I'm just slightly, my kind of nudge is that I don't think Isak will start at the moment. Ekitike is in great form, 2 goals against Leeds and Brighton, and they don't seem to be trusted to play together. It's only happened twice in the Champions League against Inter and Frankfurt, so I would be surprised to see them both start, but you never know. And to be honest, Isak hasn't been so far on the games that he's played anywhere near the Newcastle Isak, so
Dr. Tottenham will see him now.
Yes, he'll probably come to life because he does like a goal against Spurs, doesn't he?
He does.
So I'm going to be at the press conference on Friday, so there'll be lots of updates on the football.london website, and there'll also be lots of content from us from Saturday's game. Ali, hopefully might be able to squeeze in a pod next week, maybe before Christmas.
We'll have a try. We'll see if we can.
Can't make any promises.
See what Santa brings. Yes.
Yeah, we'll see what Santa brings. But if we don't hear from you, we hope you have a great Christmas. And sorry, if you don't hear from us, I should say.
All these phone calls you're going to get now.
I know, exactly. We hope you have a great Christmas with your family and friends. And don't forget, to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, please go to nordvpn.com/talkingtottenham. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And the link is in the podcast episode description box below.